It is Wednesday, and in Louisiana, the average price of a gallon of gas is over $4. A year ago, it was $2.70. When might prices come down? Will they ever come down? Today, we're going to dive into confusion and uncertainty in the oil and gas industry and what these events across the world mean to you and your family. Welcome to The Deal, our show about business and money and all the things that it takes to make it work. Louisiana has a long history with oil and gas, and our guest does too. Let me introduce you to Robert Mills. Robert, it is great to have you today. I want you to think Billy Bob Thornton, but without the hit TV show. Robert is coming up on 50 years in the oil and gas business. You were once a landman. You've drilled, you've operated wells for 27 years with Calumet Specialty Products, which has 3 refineries in Northwest Louisiana. Now, Robert's job was sourcing the crude. So he had to find the oil, the raw feedstock, to feed those refineries. And that took him all over the world. And by the way, he also served a term in the Senate in Louisiana, so he got to see the sausage being made. Robert, welcome. We are sitting here in the beautiful boutique hotel in downtown Shreveport called the Remington Suites. And the reason we're here is because this hotel exists because of oil and gas dollars.
True.
So it has meant a lot to Northwest Louisiana, to Louisiana as a whole, and to our nation. But we're going to start today with something I heard at Kroger a couple of days ago. I was standing in line getting some gas. The guy who was in the work truck behind me yells to his friend who's right ahead of him in another work truck and says, "I just paid $50 for 13 gallons of gas." And he was noticeably concerned about that, as we all are. But I think that in the United States, even though we're dealing with high gas prices and other things that are attributed to the cost of petroleum products, we are blissfully unaware at what is going on around the rest of the world. Let's talk a little bit about how oil and gas and the higher prices are affecting everywhere, not only us.
Well, there's no question. We live in a bubble in the United States. We are truly more independent than ever in terms of oil and gas. We've got a huge near-term supply of crude oil, and we've got a massive long-term supply of natural gas. And so we are less affected, not threatened with a can't find gasoline like
We'll always be, right,
Yeah,
we'll always be able to get it.
Yeah, well, I remember the day when you stood in line, and there's, like I say, short term, you can have some issues with supply, but realistically, in the United States of America, we are independent at this point in time. We don't have a perfectly balanced amount of refinery capacity for every product. I read an article yesterday, there's going to be dire straits, there's going to be a horrible shortage of motor oil, because we import quite a bit of motor oil that's made overseas, and those refineries, we'll talk about them later, they are in dire straits. And there is a severe lack of crude oil because the Hormuz Straits being closed, but, as well as refinery capacity being offline. But anyway, again, in America, we are just blessed beyond measure with the amount of natural resources that we have. And the industry, even though it's aged in terms of, there hadn't been many refineries built in the last 50 years. And so very few refineries built in the last 50 years. And so we've been repurposing older refineries to make the products that we need, and learning how to make the very specialized things that we need. And so all that's still ongoing. But we do have a intermediate problem with the pricing of oil, crude oil particularly.
Let's talk about how the pricing of crude oil is a global pricing. It's not something that you can just wave a magic wand in the United States and say, we want crude oil to cost this much because we produce it.
Well, we've done that before, and it's not very good for industry or for a free country. And so setting prices, artificial prices, we've gotten away from over the years. But so crude oil is a
global commodity.
It's a global commodity. You can just pick it up and move it quite easily in small containers and large containers, and a 2 million barrel batch in a ship. And so it's very transportable, and it's in high demand at this point in time with some people that have truly a supply disruption. But so don't think that something going on in the Middle East, where a huge amount of oil and natural gas are consumed on a daily basis and produced on a daily basis, don't think that's not going to affect the price of our product. And we might have to, at some point, by paying more, as we're doing today, protect that natural resource, keep it in America, but we're going to have to compete price-wise, and so that's the way of the world, and so crude oil is the bottom of the pricing structure. Obviously, the things that we make from crude oil, including gasoline, motor gasoline that you put in your car, diesel fuel that you put in trucks more than likely, and of course jet fuel. You're hearing more and more about a severe crisis with jet fuel.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be a big problem.
Price of airline tickets. People are talking about, trying to make their summer vacation plans, and the price of airline tickets are just rising like crazy. Price of cruises are going up. Everything comes down to what is going on in the oil industry.
There's no free lunch. We consume oil and natural gas in high volumes all over. Now, natural gas is very unusual. It's not as easily transported as crude oil is. You have to liquefy it and put it into a large container and move it. It's a substantial chemical process as well as mechanical process to turn natural gas, which is a gas, into a liquid so that you can move it. It's like 600 times more efficient to move it as a liquid as it is as truly as a vapor. And so that's the only real way that it goes overseas. But it does that, and it does that on a daily basis. And there more and more, as you read about in the Advocate on a daily basis, they're building liquefaction plants in South Louisiana, particularly in Southeast Texas.
We're going to talk about all of this in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to ask
all that over there is affecting us today.
Everything, right. Everything is global. Everything over there affects everything over here, and I think that that's certainly something that people have come to the realization of with everything going on. But again, you've been in this business for 50 years.
Sure.
You've been in the refinery business for 27 years. The International Energy Agency has 32 member nations, and their executive director, here was his quote: "The combined impacts amount to the greatest threat to global energy security in history." And he went on to call it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. In your 50 years working in this, have you seen anything that even comes close to this that you can, point your finger to? And I know the situation was different, but it just globally that has created such a confusion?
This is unprecedented in the history of modern day, and so we've been hooked on crude oil and the products that made crude oil for 150 years or so. And so I remember, like say back in the 70s, we referenced, gas lines, couldn't get gas. Some of this, that was all kind of self-made problems.
Right,
and
during the Carter administration.
Some
right.
price control issues and all this. So we caused all that, and that was internal. Truly on a worldwide basis today, I would not think that anybody alive today could say they've seen this before. I think this is all new. It's a global event, and we are just happily insulated quite a bit from what truly is about to happen. And it's like I said, we're what, 2 months into this now? It's not about over. This in Europe, if you were in Europe, if you're planning to go to Europe in the next 30, 40, 50 days, think about that. There's going to be a problem with diesel fuel, particularly with gasoline, and with the energy required to move around freely in Europe. And so those folks are really on notice that they're about to have to really kind of tighten the belt.
And let's talk about Asia. 80% of the oil that goes through the Strait of Hormuz goes to Asia. So in Asia, again, talking about the United States being pretty insulated, our businesses are open. We can go get gas at the pump. It may cost more than we want it to cost. Our groceries may cost more because of diesel fuel and transportation and all those things, but we can get them. In Asia, they're having to shut down businesses, maybe only going to work 2 days a week instead of 5. They're shutting down schools because they don't have the energy to keep the schools open. So we really, as people are making their travel plans, obviously those are things they're thinking about as well. Where in the world can I go where I'll have air conditioning, where my tour bus will be able to get the fuel that it needs to take me to the next stop? So it really is unprecedented what we're seeing around the world.
The short answer, this is a great time to visit America.
National parks are great, and they're seeing, by the way, record numbers already. So
Good.
I think a lot of people are thinking that as well. You mentioned oil and gas, and the people who are in it are a different breed of cat. I'm just going to say that. You know that better than anybody. These are folks who are willing to dig a hole in rock for the chance to strike something and spend a lot of money doing it. And the Fed, the Dallas Fed, keeps its finger on the pulse of the oil and gas industry, not only in Texas, but in North Louisiana and also in southern New Mexico. So that's the Dallas Fed's region. And recently, because of the war in Iran, they decided that they needed to ask some interesting questions that they didn't need to wait to ask. And so some of the questions that they asked, 120 oil and gas firms responded. And again, these were from those areas I talked about. And one of the questions they asked was when traffic might return to normal in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, they asked this in April, and 20% said May. So they're wrong.
Yeah.
That 20%, they're out of there. 39% believed August, 26% believed November, 14% later than that. And you were telling me, I sent you that list of questions, and did you tell me that oil and gas people are generally optimists?
Absolutely, no doubt.
And they have to be, don't they?
You have to be a little bit crazy
Yeah, you do.
to spend the kind of money we have spent drilling oil and gas wells with the success rate that we had over the years. It's a very, very few people got very, very rich, but we all thought we were going to. So,
that's what keeps you coming back to
we
anything.
were very optimistic, and that might be a polite way to say we were very greedy, because we wanted our share of the pie, and we wanted the big share. And so it kept us all motivated, and we spent a lot of money, and not all of us made a reasonable return. So, but you hear the stories, you see the people on TV, and yeah, I remember my grandfather started in this business in 1919, and he knew all of these, even in North Louisiana, he knew all these guys that got filthy rich. And I'm not saying filthy rich, they got rich, and there's absolutely, I love them for it.
They got very rich.
They got very rich. So,
yeah.
Congratulations for them. But and they were the underpinning of North Louisiana and East Texas, and Shreveport was the center of the oil and gas business outside of New York City. Every major company had an office in Shreveport, Louisiana, and this was the heart and the soul of the grand days of oil and gas, wildcatting, huge discoveries in Texas and Louisiana, and of course, like I say, Shreveport was prosperous and doing great, and then of course, there came Houston. It was a little cow town, and all of a sudden everybody decided that was the place to be. And that great exodus in the 50s and in the early 60s was very harmful for our economy. But nevertheless, it has been invested with optimism of we're going to be successful, because we had all these role models of the folks that did. And so we were chasing a dream, and we continue to. And it's different today by multiple levels of the money required, the expertise required, the engineering required. It's not a fool's game anymore. It kind of was back in my day, but it's very complicated and very structured, because you have to deal with banks and the money and the folks that really control the strings of it, which is now the financial side.
And mentioning the fact of optimism, some of the questions that the Dallas Fed asked was, do you intend to increase whatever it is that you're doing? Are you going to hire more people? Do you intend to increase production? Interestingly, it was yes, but. Explain that. I mean, we've got high prices for oil and gas, or at least oil. Prices going up, some for gas. Prices of a gallon of gasoline are certainly higher. Why wouldn't oil and gas businesses be pedal to the metal right now?
We know all things change. And so again, as we just said, it requires a huge amount of money to be in the business today, and to explore and to process And you don't make long-term decisions based on short-term prices. I mean, we'll probably talk somewhere along the way about the crack spread, which is
Like to.
the ability of a crude oil refinery to make money, or a measure of it to make money. And so the refinery side, again, it is a long-term process to build and operate refineries. That's why you don't see them popping up left and right.
Let me just insert there. The last refinery that was built, do you even recall what it was?
Well,
Was it one in South Louisiana somewhere? And I had heard at one point that getting the permitting and then the construction was about a 15 to 20-year process.
it would be a nightmare, you can imagine. And so, truly a greenfield refinery, I think there was one built back 30 years ago or so, but for the most part, we've been just increasing capacity, as well as making improvements inside existing refineries to be able to make different products that are required today versus back in the old days. So it's not a business where you can just go decide and build a refinery. What community would say, "Yep, bring me one,
Bring your,
please"?
yeah, we want that refinery right next to that
Yeah, so
neighborhood. Yeah, it's
it's
tough.
difficult, and yeah, it has not been expanded. The footprint here has not been expanded really at all, measurable for sure. But we've added some capacity in some limited areas. But we've shut a lot of refineries down, particularly in
Yes,
the
we have.
west and far west in California.
You were talking about crack spread, and people are like, what are that? What in the heck? What is that? Well, we talked a little about what all goes into pricing for a barrel of oil. But what we really haven't talked a lot about is what goes into pricing for a gallon of gasoline. And there are things that people certainly don't know if you're not in the industry. So let's talk about that a little bit. What goes into the pricing? Why, and maybe along the way, why is diesel higher than regular unleaded gasoline too? Where it used to be, diesel would be a little bit lower in some places. So pull out the old crack spread sheet and give us some wisdom here.
Yeah, well, like I say, crude oil is the biggest single expense in the products that we buy, that come out of a refinery. And so we were talking about, does a refinery make money? Why don't we have more gasoline and all? They're pretty well, refineries have been run in the last several decades at capacity or at near capacity. And do refineries make money? Well, every now and then they make a little money. And I've been in the refinery business quite a while. Historically, refineries were owned by the major companies because it's a big asset, and the major companies elected really to make money at the wellhead and not at the refinery. And this is my opinion. I surely can't prove all this, but I think I can show you over time that the refineries they did not value profits at the refinery. And so the profitability was by producing the oil and gas, which back in the old days, the major companies and the big independent operators had the reserves in the ground and the daily production.
It's like the Exxons of the world.
Yeah.
They have their oil fields, but they also have their refineries.
So refineries historically have not made a whole lot of money, and the crack spread, which was the profitability above the cost of crude, back in the late 90s was extremely low, like $2.50 a barrel. And so out of that $2.50, you had to operate a refinery, pay your people, and you can't do that. And so refineries were losing a whole lot of money. And you're aware there's a refinery in Shreveport that changed hands back around 2001 or two. And it had been highly unprofitable for a long time, not because of anything that the owners were doing. It was just that's the way of the world. Crude oil price was X, and gasoline prices were Y, and there wasn't a big enough difference. And so, fortunately, after the newer owners in the early 2000s bought that refinery, unbeknownst to anybody else, couldn't predict it, the crack spread went from $2.50 to $7 or $8, which was huge.
Oh, yes.
Well, the crack spread today, if you calculate it, comes up, and I did that just a little while ago, something like $85 a barrel. So now that doesn't mean that every refinery is making $85 a barrel for what they process, but that means that it's not $2
Right.
and it's not $10.
Right.
And so, who profits by that? Well, the stockholders. I looked at just two companies. Look at Exxon. A lot of people understand Exxon. It's a huge company, and this is one of those that has a lot of oil and gas production as well as refinery capacity. From 2016 to 20, the value of the stock price of Exxon ranged from $32 all the way in a blip up to $100 a share. But in 2020 to 2026, it has ranged from that low of $32 now up to $150 or $170 per share. And so obviously Exxon makes money, and the shareholders make more money with these higher energy prices and the higher profitability of refineries. So I was curious, just a pure refinery company, kind of like the one that has 3 refineries here in North Louisiana, how are they holding up in this? Well, I looked at Valero Energy, which is, again, a well-respected national company, and their stock price, the 10-year stock price ranges from $85 to $149 in 2016 to 2022. But now they're at $259 a share.
Wow.
So, refineries are making money right now.
Right now.
Good for them.
Yeah.
And so the price of gasoline does have plenty enough room for a profit at the refinery, plenty enough room for a profit at the wellhead for the producers that are normally different from the producer and the end seller. The gasoline stations are really a convenience store that just happens to have a gasoline pump out front. They make money on bubble gum and beer.
But the gasoline gets people in there to buy the bubble gum and the ices and all that kind of stuff.
And so that's a whole different animal with the convenience stores model that we're using today.
We were talking, and we've been talking about gasoline because everybody uses gas. Some people use diesel. Diesel obviously is used to transport everything that we buy at stores. But there are so many other things that utilize petroleum in the creation. And it is remarkable. Everything from candles to, it used to be, there's a Boudreaux's butt wax in Louisiana.
Boudreaux's butt paste.
Butt paste. Sorry.
Let's be accurate.
Let's be accurate on that one. Right. They had some petroleum product in them. I mean, just a tremendous amount of things that people don't. Vaseline petroleum jelly. I mean, it's got petroleum in the name. I mean, we should know that there's petroleum in petroleum jelly. But so many things. There are food products with petroleum in them. You're talking about the refinery in North Louisiana. One of their refineries in Cotton Valley actually was a kosher refinery, wasn't it? There was a rabbi that would have to go and make sure that everything was laid out correctly because
particular products out of that refinery made had to have a kosher approval to be marketed as kosher products. And a rabbi from Houston came up and inspected the refinery and went through the whole process of how the crude oil is acquired and how it's stored and how it's refined. And then once that refined product, the particular ones that they were looking at, how it's handled and shipped. And it was very unique. And of course, that particular product ended up with a pretty high cost to those consumers, but they were willing to pay that because that's what they wanted. Just as the Amish, who don't really believe in electricity, they live a very simple life. They wanted a very high quality kerosene that they would use in their lanterns. And so we made a very special, low emissions, low carbon type of product for kerosene lamps for the Amish, and they'd be glad to pay for it. And so we were glad to make it.
and so that is just amazing because people just don't realize how many items that they touch every day or that touch them have some petroleum product in them. And we were talking again about diesel fuel and jet fuel and avgas and things of that nature that have just gone up. And I think I know why that is. There are fewer refineries that are making them, for one thing. But is that the whole reason why those prices are higher? or are there some other reasons as well?
No, it's really supply and demand, and so I mean that's the great thing about truly in America, supply and demand are pretty well in balance. Not many people make 100 low lead.
Right,
Nobody
right.
does locally, in
That's
fact.
for general
Yeah, yeah,
aviation
yeah.
aircraft, right?
So
Hmm.
you would know that, but it's the more unique, the more nichey a product is, the more subject it is to high prices in high demand. And so I've read a little article said, what if oil disappeared tomorrow? If oil disappeared tomorrow, there'd be no more jet fuel, gasoline, or diesel. But yeah, it goes a lot further. Food production would be devastated. Um, Catastrophic services everywhere. Beyond transportation, there are essential feedstocks for pharmaceutical, plastic, medical supplies, latex gloves, medical tubes, insulin pens. It goes on and on. Hydrocarbons. Crude oil is just a nickname for a vast group of hydrocarbons. And to process crude oil into products, you just boil it. It turns the liquid turns to a steam, and as it goes up a column, tall column, you separate these products out when they convert back to a liquid, and so that's the distillation process. But you could not list in several pages all of the products that are made from crude oil.
The, I guess the biggest question that anyone that I've talked to has had is, when are things going to get back to normal? Yeah, that's,
I'm listening.
I know, I know. Oh, let's come up with a date.
Yeah.
We'll be the first. But the fact of the matter is that when you look at all of the damage that's been done in the Persian Gulf region, the refineries, the oil fields that have now been put on hold, they're no longer pumping oil, they've been shut down. The refineries have been closed or damaged. Um, Gas fields, it's a wide variety of things. Pipelines have been damaged. And not only that, but obviously the transportation in and out. Even if things went back to normal, if the strait opened, war's over tomorrow, what's your crazy guess on when or if things will go back to normal? And let me just throw in that I've heard a lot of oil and gas people say, we don't think prices will ever go back to what they were.
Well, I disagree with that.
You disagree with that
Yeah.
one? What about when things will go back to normal, or how long will it
Not
take?
as soon as we want.
That's a great thing.
Um,
Years.
it is, yeah, there could be, not thinking of Shreveport, but thinking of the world,
Mhm.
there will be disruptions for years. Again, if the Hormuz Strait opened today, which it's not, it would take a long time for things to sort out in terms of logistics and getting the liquefied natural gas, which is a huge component that comes from out through the strait. And so it would take a long time for the world to balance if the production in the refineries was there. I've got a list here of all the refineries that have been shut down and damaged to a degree, but they're very, very secretive about how much damage has been inflicted with this list of the refineries. And so it's not like you can just call a local plumbing company to say, put this thing back together real quick. These are specialized metals in many cases, specialized catalysts that are made out of precious metals that affect the final production. It's getting all this put back together will be more than a year. So and it'll be done in phases. It'll be done in pieces, and so we will start to recover incrementally as soon as the free shipping starts again from the Straits of Hormuz. And so, but the production, the balancing, and the delivery of products is going to be at least a year, and there will be products that are probably a year and a half or so from being in normal production, and then again the transportation of that. So call it 2 years. Some people, not us, some people are going to be suffering and looking for a normal supply of hydrocarbon products.
Our suffering will come mainly in higher prices as opposed to not being able to get the product. So
That's the way I would see it.
yeah, Robert, this has been a great conversation. I really do appreciate you being here. You're just such a wealth of knowledge. It's so interesting to talk about the oil and gas industry, especially for folks who realize that it plays such a big role in Louisiana and in Northwest Louisiana, but never really realized, how all the pieces fit.
Well,
So,
I'm a wealth of opinions.
well, knowledgeable opinion.
Okay,
How,
thank you.
how about we put it that way? For updates on all the news of the day, and oil and gas is certainly a big thing that I cover in my business newsletter, I would encourage you absolutely to subscribe to the Shreveport-Bossier City Advocate, and also please subscribe to my business newsletter that comes out every Tuesday and Friday. I know Robert reads it. He often will send me an email saying, "What the heck are you talking about?" And I will explain to him. He'll go, "Yeah, yeah, okay, I got that." Be on the lookout too for future episodes of the Deal podcast. We will be around with other fascinating conversations. And Robert, again, thank you so much. And
My
I'd like
pleasure.
to give a shout out too to the Remington Suite for this great location. And I hope to see you soon.